Final hour overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, the O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill, Jamie Noodles McLennan in Edmonton. So Frankie Corrado's in here.
Nice you caught yourself.
Buddy.
You caught yourself.
Just want everyone to know Noodles is in Edmonton. So Frankie's in here. Very smooth.
Nice save.
Smooth. Yeah. So we got Pierre coming up from Edmonton. And again, LeBron with CJ wrote an article for The Athletic, asking Sid and Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault for them all to kind of give their input on what they're seeing from McDavid, which is kind of a tribute to this guy. Like, it must be pretty incredible if you're McDavid. Obviously, he knows how great he is. He seems like a really humble guy. Like, he's all business all the time. Yet he's not stupid. He knows he's better than everyone else. He knows the performances he's putting on here, and he knows what's at stake. And if it ends up just flopping tomorrow night, that is a possibility. I don't want to pull that
it's
energy
a sad
into the
one,
air.
and nobody wants to talk. Everyone's like, it's amazing how it went from down and out to they're winning the cup.
Right.
Well, the guy had 8 points in 2 games. That's like, and now the power play's alive, and Bobrovsky's getting caved in. It's like the script completely flipped basically in 2 games now. So I don't know. I feel like people are thinking Game 6 is almost a formality. It's like
That's
we're
what I'm
going
saying,
back
Frankie.
to Florida for Game 7.
And I think, which is a wild mentality to have. And I guess I can't speak for Oilers fans. I'm not one. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was the feeling walking into that building tomorrow night. Yeah, you're down 3-2. Like, that's a backwards mentality. If your team's down 3-2, you're going into the building freaking out.
It's a hell of a drug, Hazy. It's a hell of a drug.
It really is.
To just say we're going to Game 7, it's like a formality, whoever just said that. Like,
yeah.
We're going to Florida. This is just one of those things. We had to fly all the way back here just to do this because we're going all the way back.
Yeah. And yet, could be 5-0 Florida tomorrow night. Could be a morgue in there for the third period. Could be.
It could be. Doesn't mean it will be. Like Florida, for that to happen, Florida would have to do a 180 based on the way things have gone the last 2 games for them. And actually, like, Florida's Paul Maurice was right after last game. Their 5-on-5 game was really good. It was the special teams that lost the game for the Panthers. Like, Edmonton gets the shorty. Edmonton's good on the power play. So there is something to be said. Like, if you peel it back a little bit, Florida did play well at 5-on-5, but it's just they got their... Florida got their game that they lost playing better at 5-on-5. Edmonton got their game that they lost playing better at 5-on-5. And like Skinner's had his good game, Bobrovsky's had his good game. And they've both had bad. Like, I feel like now it's almost certain narratives are sawed off between both teams.
Yeah, and yet one team's a win away and the other one's 2 wins away. The Panthers are still in the driver's seat, yet that pendulum has swung completely the other way. To the point where it's like, oh, it's Edmonton's series to lose now, and just
crazy.
How is that a reality? How are we living in this world, this reality? It's just too far-fetched, and it's just not true. And we had Mike Rupp on an hour ago, and Rupper, he was sticking with his prediction that whoever won Game 5 was going to win the series, but you could tell he was kind of teetering on it a little bit. Out of respect to Florida, because Florida...
he was like, I still believe in it, but they could go in there and get their ass kicked.
Yeah. Like, Florida's a pretty good team, and that's to be fair to the Oilers, what was crazy about them being down 3-0 is they're a really good team. It was that to me was something I didn't see coming, because I thought Edmonton was good enough to make it a series. Turns out they are, and they have. Yet Florida is too good of a team for it to swing completely the other way. That doesn't mean Edmonton can't win this. They can, but they're not winning 8-1 tomorrow night. You know what I mean? Like, it's not as if it's not as, in my opinion, it's not as if it's gotten to a point now where it's Edmonton, and Florida has no grasp on anything. I don't see that happening, and I think with the 2 full days off, it does just feel so distant what happened in the past. And I don't know who that benefits. I don't know if it does benefit Florida more than Edmonton. Or vice versa. I'm not sure. But 2 days off is an eternity when you are constantly thinking about the game, right?
Oh, it's misery. Like that. There's nothing worse. I would rather travel and play like normal.
You know what guys would be struggling with right now? Like sleep in general after games, game day naps. Like you see some of the looks on these guys' faces and their eyes when they're doing their media availability. Guys look exhausted, and we're day 62 of the playoffs basically. Like these guys are zonked now. Not to mention the physical toll of everything involved in playing.
Yeah, well, exactly. And guess what? You better be ready come puck drop tomorrow because the game's waiting for you. Let's head back to Edmonton. Here's our TSN hockey insider, Pierre LeBrun, joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. What's happening, Pierre?
Well, listen, Frankie, you think the players are tired after a 2-month run. What about us, the media, covering them? Come on now.
Good point. That's
right.
How are you holding up, Pierre? Are you showing signs of fatigue, or are you gutting it out?
I'm just taking it, one Air Canada delay. I'm just kidding. I don't want to get into that.
Okay.
Has the travel just been miserable, man? Tell us the truth.
You know what? I don't like complaining about it because, honest to God, I mean this. You'll never find me tweeting about a crappy travel day because my crappiest travel day is still probably a lot of people love to do what we do for a living. Honestly, I'm not being I'm not being funny when I say that. I've always tried to keep that stuff to myself. But yeah, there have been some days where, especially because this time of year too, the weather, you get like crazy weather. I was covering Dallas, Colorado in the second round, and it's like, watch out for the tornado. Yes, I'm happy our flight's delayed. I agree. I agree with you guys. Let's stay put for now.
No kidding. Well, how are we feeling about tomorrow night? Because we just had a discussion here where it feels like the pendulum has swung so much that it's Edmonton's series to lose now, even though they're down 3-2 in the series, Pierre. Can you make sense of this?
It's, listen, I felt certainly for the first time in this series after the game the other night, I felt the Panthers really tight in their, especially more even in their body language and what they said. You know, you guys know this about me. I love reading that on athletes and coaches. And I thought Florida looked really tight the other night after they couldn't finish it at home. And they understood now what this was going to be like Friday night. Old Canada is going to be spectacular here at Rogers Place tomorrow night. But, they are a veteran team that's playing in their second straight Cup final. And, it's funny. The Oilers have talked a lot about, well, if there's any team in the league that's actually suited to come back down from 3-0, it's us. Look at what we've gone through this year when we started the year with 2 wins in 12 games. And that's true. I mean, they've been the kings of adversity all year. But I would also say if there's any team that can come into tomorrow night and actually feel at home in a hostile environment, it's probably Florida, who have now sort of gotten used to this. You think about the second round in Boston, guys, and how crazy that was, and then MSG in the conference finals. Like, the Panthers have made a habit of feeling pretty comfortable in their own skin and in crazy environments. So I think tomorrow night's going to be spectacular is what I think.
Pierre, morning skate tomorrow, whose eyes are you wanting to get a look at? Like, who's the one player in the series that might be Maurice, Knobloch, McDavid, Tkachuk? Like, who do you want to get a look at and see where they're at in the morning?
By far, Sergei Bobrovsky of a dog. The problem is he doesn't talk on game days, which is very common for most starting goalies in this league.
Why him?
Because he's not been right the last 2 games. And I can't quite figure out why. But a year ago, he came undone in the final against Vegas as well. And he's just been so good in these playoffs, just as he was a year ago. And the one thing that, when you talk to other people around the league who analyze his game and talk about him, is fatigue eventually catches up to this guy. The data supports it. And, it really, aside from the fact that he's been playing for 2 months, okay, you're tired like everyone else and you're 35 years old. But double off days galore here in this series, as you guys talked about. So he should be able to reset, you would think, physically and energy-wise. But to me, he is the player on both teams that I really am curious about heading into tomorrow night, because he's been outplayed by Stuart Skinner the last 2 games.
Pierre, when you're in the media room after the games and you're listening to Paul Maurice and you're listening to Chris Knobloch, and especially after last game, Game 5, how different is the energy between both those two coaches? Is it different? Is it the same? Have they kind of changed how their tone is after the games? How does it feel in that room?
Yeah, that's a great question, Frankie. And I would say that for the first time in all of these playoffs, that Paul Maurice sounded, like I said, not quite himself after the loss the other night. It was like the uh-oh moment. But by the next day, he was back to himself, and he's been, just amazing to deal with, and allowing us into his brain and entertaining everyone throughout these playoffs. And he's back to that, which is a good sign. But for that brief moment after Game 5, I thought he was staring into the abyss a bit at his post-game newser, because I think he understood that he was in one now. And that's a scary thing against the best player in the world. I have this piece out with Chris Johnson today, guys, in The Athletic, and one of the things that we did is we reached out to Chris reached out to Sidney Crosby. I reached out to Nathan McKinnon, Steven Stamkos, a whole bunch of guys, to hear their comments on what they think McDavid's doing right now. Like, never mind what we think, or at least what I think, but to hear McDavid's peers and what they have to say about what they're seeing right now from Connor McDavid, it's just mind-blowing. And one of the things Stamkos shared with me yesterday is that he trained last summer north of Toronto with McDavid, and he said that McDavid went over to him last summer and picked his brain, Stamkos, on what it's like to win a cup, what are some of the things that Stamkos, could sort of share on how you prepare for that, and just kept picking his brain. And Stamkos said to me yesterday, I had a feeling that he was ready for this year. And I just find that stuff fascinating because of these guys all competing against each other. And right now they're all looking at 97 and saying, okay, that's on a whole new level now.
Did you ask Stamkos where he's signing on July 1st?
Oh, follow-up question.
Look at Hazy B.
I'm on it.
Really,
he's a journalist.
He's a journalist.
Investigative journalist.
I mean, Hazy, it would have behooved me to ask that question, probably, right?
We don't say that word anymore. We dumped that. Today we've dumped learning lessons, behooved, and what else, Frankie?
What was the other one? In on everything.
In on Pierre, by the way, we have a note for you, Pierre. You're not allowed to say a GM is in on everything because it's not possible. So we're not saying it anymore.
I've been guilty of saying that in the past. So that's a good. I like when OverDrive helps, sharpen my approach as an insider. I like that.
You got it.
I like that.
So Stammer, where are we at? Is he going back to Tampa? Or what's the story?
I would say at the moment that things are status quo. That both sides are still talking, although that did not come from Steven. That came from another source.
Okay, because
all
of a sudden things are happening here. We had those deals yesterday. Woo! And there's some good UFAs available, man. Like, Sam Reinhart's going to get there. I think Montour's going to get there. Obviously, you got Marcia. So you've got a number of guys.
Wait a minute. You think for sure Sam Reinhart's going to market?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, we're a week away. I guess. I mean, maybe he resigns.
I think they're going to find a way to get him signed.
Okay.
In what, 12 hours? They got 12 hours to get a deal done with that guy.
I know, it's crazy, right? Even though they literally have not done that much on that, I think they're going to find a way. I think Montour goes to market. Another guy actually I talked to yesterday for that piece on McDavid, but is Jonathan Marchessault, who is UFA as well.
Marchessault?
Yeah.
Marchessault. Okay.
I've never heard Marchessault.
Well, how do you pronounce it?
Marchessault.
Right. C'est Jonathan Marchessault, Jeff.
Marchessault. You got to get it right, man. This is a professional program.
This guy's been around for a long time, Marchessault, and I have never heard Marchessault.
But I like it, and I like it a lot.
Technically, I'm not. You guys. I go by Pierre LeBrun on TSN, as you guys know. But really, my name is Pierre LeBrun.
What? LeBrunner?
crushing it right
What is your real name? Say it again.
What is my real name?
What's your real handle?
Say it again, Pierre.
Or as I say when I check into a hotel, they always ask for your last name, and I always say LeBron.
LeBron, okay.
And,
that's even better. I like that.
And I get a funny look. Yeah.
Okay. What were we asking? I don't remember Reinhart going back to Florida. Yeah, so you think that's going to happen?
I think they'll find a way. And it's going to be, listen, if he comes back, I mean, I think he would find it really hard to leave. Again, I could be wrong, but, I've asked Reinhart a couple times during the season about how this will play out, and gosh, he loves it so much with the Panthers, just built a huge place, really happy there. I mean, if he stays, it's for certainly less than what other teams would be willing to pay him July 1st, plus the no-state income tax. But, with Tkachuk making $9.5 million a year and Barkov making $10 million a year, I view that as an internal cap on that team.
Yeah.
So I would think the number would start with an 8. If he stays. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
And he'll take it. And he'll sign it.
I know why you're saying that.
Oh, I know exactly. Because William Nylander's making $11.5, and this guy's going to make $8. He's going to make $3 million less than William Nylander, and Reinhart just ripped home like 55 goals, and it's probably going to win a cup.
That's the price for driving to the practice rink in a golf cart and being able to go to the beach and all that kind of stuff. Or the price of management saying, this is how we operate. If you want to stay, this is what we'll pay you, and actually putting your stake in the ground. And doing it.
And if you're not going to take it, we'll get another guy.
Exactly. We'll find someone else. You're not bigger than the team. You want to play here? This is the way we operate.
Or I'm wrong, and he'll go to market and make $10 million, and it'll make you feel better. But
$10 million still won't. I mean, it's still anyway. It doesn't matter. Go ahead, Pierre.
But by the way, like Gustav Forsling, who if people haven't watched a lot of Florida this year, but now in the playoffs, it's pretty obvious to everyone where Forsling ranks among the top defensemen in this league. He's certainly somewhere up there with the way he plays the game. The fact that his extension hasn't even kicked in yet at that number, $5.75 million a year for 8 years, is ridiculous. I mean, that's already
unreal.
The best contract in the league, basically. Once Draisaitl's deal, expires.
Pierre, you tweeted out about the potential, even though it is very rare, of a Martin Necas offer sheet. And then, if you kind of take a look into cap friendly and, if you were going to sign him to an offer sheet, it has to be somewhere between just south of $7 million and just north of $9 million. And the compensation might be a first, a second, and a third. Like, do you think there's going to be teams that want to go down that road with Carolina and Necas?
Oh, Frank, someone's on their CBA studying here, prepping for July 1st. I like this. That's exactly why I've heard that a couple of times this week, is that you could offer him up to $9 or $9.1 million a year, and it's still a first, second, and third as a compensation. You don't think there's teams out there that wouldn't pay a first, second, and third for Martin Necas? I mean, come on. Mm-hmm. The problem, and it's why I don't think there will be one, even though teams are talking about it internally, and it's why they're so rare, is that I think the Hurricanes would match in a heartbeat, as they did with Aho when Montreal tried that route a number of years ago. So, but the reason that some teams have talked about this internally is because there's some frustration with the price that the Hurricanes have set on him in trade talks. I mean, as I reported yesterday, the Hurricanes have concrete trade offers on the table for this player. But they told those teams, not good enough. This is where we believe this player is. We view him as a star player, and we want a star player package in return.
And yet they don't want to give him the number of a star player. So what is it? Figure your life out, because it can't be both. I don't get it. We love this guy. He's a megastar. And then the guy's like, I'm a megastar. Are you going to pay me like one? They're like, no, we're not doing that. It's just so figure out what you're going to do with the player and do it.
And he wants out. So this is
why does he want out?
Interesting one.
Why does he want out?
He wants out. My understanding is, and listen, I know you've got your lines of communication there with that franchise, but he wants out because I don't think he's been happy with his role. He was on the third line in the playoffs, right? And I think it's something. This isn't overnight that this has happened. Like, I think he's been frustrated with his role for a couple of years, and I don't think he wants to stay there. So this is going to be interesting to see how it plays out because there is real interest in him around the league because of his age and the ability. Some people view him having the ceiling of being a next level guy.
I would show him clips of him playing in the playoffs the last couple of years and say, this is why we want you out. And there you go. I don't know.
Right.
Whatever he gets, he gets. I just hope they can figure something out because the more it drags on, the more it's.
Well, I'd like to see an offer sheet. I don't think it'll happen. The NHL doesn't operate that way. And yet, there's been trades. The goalie market, I guess, is set. The trade market with Markstrom and. Is Allmark going to go? And like we keep, obviously in Toronto, they got to figure that out. I don't think it's getting enough oxygen at all. The goaltending situation the Leafs currently find themselves in, and I have no doubt they'll sign someone or trade for someone. They will get somebody for sure. But as of right now, they're not in a great spot. And Ottawa's a team that always comes up. They just gave Korpisalo a 5-year deal. I don't know. What are you going to do? Yes, you need goaltending, but what are you going to do?
Not the people currently running the Senators.
Sure, but he's still on. He's still on the books. So you can't get rid of him because Steve Stamkos didn't sign him.
I think the two most confusing goalie contracts from last summer for me, and I know it's unpredictable, but were Korpisalo in Ottawa and Tristan Jarry's extension in Pittsburgh. Both of those contracts I thought were real overreaches, but I get that it's different teams really struggle figuring out how to spend their money in goal. But you're right, Brian, to bring up the Leafs because I hope there's no confusion about this. I mean, the Leafs were in on Markstrom. I mean, they made an offer and they went after him. Obviously, Brad Treliving knows Jacob Markstrom well from his time in Calgary, but the Devils from months ago, as you guys know from talking about it and writing about it and everything, the Devils have had such a serious man crush on Markstrom for so long that they were going to get him. And to get him, they finally had to be willing to put a first-round pick in there, which really wasn't in there at the beginning. But, yeah, I mean, the Leafs were in there. And I will also say this, and this is not from what no one's told me this, but it's been a couple times now where the Leafs also, remember, we're in on Chris Tanev before the trade deadline. And then get him from Calgary. I don't know that the Flames want to go out of the way to help the Leafs. I'm just going to say that.
Oh, we're aware of that. We're aware of that. That's not hard to figure out.
No. So there you go. Well, I mean, I guess, they probably would be willing to do it if they called and said, we'll take Jonathan Huberdeau off your hands. Then, we'll help you out. Then we're all of a sudden
Pierre, what would the sweetener have to be on a Huberdeau trade? Like, what would a sweetener be on that to move that?
I mean, I didn't think that Pierre-Luc Dubois' contract could be moved. So, and again, at least certainly he's still young, where you think there's a chance for a bounce back there. But honestly, I wasn't sure you could move that contract, and LA moved it yesterday. I mean, I think on Huberdeau, who again the year he got traded, right before he got traded to Calgary, I think he finished second in the league in scoring. Mm-hmm. So there could be a team saying, but he's just so overpaid at 9.5 or 10.5. Sorry. I mean, what do you attach to that? It would have to be probably at least 2 first-round picks. I mean, that's where that's at right now.
Yeah, and maybe eat half the contract. On top of it. I don't know. I mean, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's not going to happen. Huberdeau is going to continue to be a Flame, and we'll see what comes of it. All right, Pierre. Good stuff, buddy. Thank you for doing this. Enjoy the game tomorrow night.
My hit next week with you guys will be my last this season because then we get into July after that, boys.
That's correct. Woo! Bring your A stuff, Pierre. We want pronunciations of all the French-Canadian players next week.
La première étoile!
Okay. Au revoir. We'll see you next week. I love it.
That was weird.
What a legend, Pierre LeBrun. How did he pronounce Marchessault?
Marchessault.
All
JP,
right.
do you have the way he pronounced his name? Please tell me.
We can find that.
He threw me for a loop when he was like, Jonathan Marchessault.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no way.
Well,
we really got derailed there.
Yeah, Marchessault. He's had a good run in Vegas, man. It doesn't seem like he'd return to Vegas. I don't know.
Well, they
about
probably
the money
said,
for him,
"Here's what
but-
we got for you. What do you think?" And he's like, "I won the Conn Smythe. I'm a 40-goal man. I'm going to sniff around." Why anyone would want to leave that market? I don't know. Maybe the guy wants to hit the jackpot. Maybe he wants a bigger house than what he's got. I don't know.
Dude, it's the same thing as Reinhart. We just, you know what I mean? Like, why would Reinhart want to leave? Even if he gets 8.5, wouldn't it be nice for him to stay there? It's a great market.
And listen, to be fair, obviously there's a huge imbalance when it comes to lifestyle, when it comes to weather, taxes, and it's not apples to apples comparing, let's say, the Leafs to the Panthers. But I also don't believe it should be a $3 million discrepancy. That's extreme. I'll give you $1 million. You know what I mean? I'll give you maybe some no trade, no movement clauses up here.
Do you think
bonus
all things equal, Nylander and Reinhart should be everything equal? They should be making the same amount of money.
I would say it's pretty close, wouldn't you? I mean,
I think Willie should be making a little more than Reinhart, just based on the history of Willie. I think he's a more productive player over the course of his career.
Guy had a pretty good year, man. He scored 50-something goals.
Yeah, I mean, listen. Reinhart
57.
this year had 57 goals and 94 points. 2 years ago, he had 82 points. It's really not that different than
I guess
Willie.
it is pretty close.
It's really not. Yeah. And he plays every single night. So does Willie. They're both great players. They're both really good top six right wingers, first line, stud, power play.
But if you were going to get into contracts, one of them should never make $3 million more than the other.
That's the whole point. Where they're both the same age and both UFAs.
Fair enough. Yeah.
That's the point. If you're both 27, 28, both UFAs in the same summer, one guy should never make 11.5 when the other guy's making 8.5. If that happens, who knows? Reinhart, maybe he signs there for 10 or 10.5 or goes somewhere else and signs for 12. But who knows what's going to happen? But if on July 1st or before that he signs an 8-year deal at 8.5, 8.75, that's a very difficult explanation. I think it's impossible to explain. The Leafs they won't, because no one's going to ask them that. Why is this guy? And it's not even about Willie. It's about the teams and what they can get their players to accept that the Leafs can't.
It wouldn't be Reinhart's fault, not Florida's fault.
It's
and
his
Reinhart
fault.
would probably look at it and say, I'll take 8.5. I want a full no move because you're not trading me anywhere else where I'd have to pay more taxes and all that kind of stuff.
But who also got a full no move?
There you go.
Willie.
Yeah.
For 11.5.
Right.
That's my point.
Yeah.
It's the Leafs, again, it's not about just hammering away at that, but Willie got one of the great contracts in cap era history. It's just an unbelievable contract.
Got the Rolls Royce of contracts.
Yeah, it's 11.5, a full no move, full no trade, 90% in bonuses. It's just an unbelievable deal. And he's a great player. Willie's a great player, had a great year. But the Leafs cannot sit there and say they won one detail of that deal.
No.
Not an ounce of the deal was, wow, the Leafs really, that was pretty good for the Leafs.
JP,
anyway.
play for these guys.
Anyway.
Who's going to be looking for a no move, no trade? Play the player that's going to want that.
Jonathan Marchessault.
What the hell?
I like it. Marchessault.
Jonathan Marchessault.
Marchessault. Yeah.
I've never heard it.
I haven't either.
Never heard it.
Marchessault is now a thing. All right, JJ Redick, the new man down in L.A., head coach of the Lakers. How is this possibly going to work, and where does LeBron come in? We'll get into that next. All right, Best Bets brought to you by FanDuel. Later in the hour, Copa America tonight, Canada, Argentina. Everything's Argentina. I saw TSN on their Instagram page post a picture of just the concessions. And it's 90% Messi jerseys and Argentina stuff, and there's a Canadian T-shirt in the corner that you can buy.
There's some. I took my buddy Brando for lunch at a Greek spot, and I said the real soccer's starting tonight because he had the Euros on, and he looked at me and he said, "Do you know what's going to happen to that team down there tonight?" And I said, "No, tell me." He said they're going to get killed.
That's the concern.
Yes.
The concern is it's Scotland, Germany to open the tournament where the Scots got smoked. You know, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. If you're on a team where you know you're the inferior team, like just don't get embarrassed. Keep it close. I think they'll get on the board. I think Canada's, you know, the way they're attacking right now, I think if they get on the board, you lose, you know, if you lose 3-1 or something, is that respectable? I don't know. I know that's a loser's mentality, but it probably is, right, Frankie? Like it probably is against that team.
5-1 is where it probably gets out of hand tonight.
Yeah,
3-1 would be fine.
Outrageous. Yeah. Yes, at that point. All right, JJ Redick. He's putting the microphone down. Is the podcast over? Like, is there going to be one last pod before JJ takes over as the head coach in LA? Or what? I mean, I guess the man with the answers is the guy we got on the line now from the LA Times. Here's Dan Woike. How you doing, Dan?
I wish I had better podcast answers for you. I wonder
on,
if this
man.
is a, we could do like a farewell. You know, I think like they pull off the one time, like sort of like, go from the red wine to like maybe a nice champagne or something like that, a classy white, and really tie a bow on this. I think we should talk about the podcast. You guys want to talk about the podcast?
Yes, please. What do you make of that? Yes, go ahead.
I've never covered a coaching search where there's been more podcast talk, because you had the LeBron JJ podcast, obviously, right? Linking things. Part of the Dan Hurley candidacy always came with like the note that LeBron James is a big fan of his, right? Because LeBron James tweeted what a genius Dan Hurley was. Well, that was because Dan Hurley was on the JJ Redick podcast talking about offenses and stuff like that. And that was LeBron quote tweeting that. Here's what I can tell you guys. LeBron James and JJ Redick were not close friends prior to this podcast. Like, they don't have 20 years of relationship outside of just being guys who played in the NBA at the same time. They obviously connected. You know, you can watch the pod, you can see them, and I think if I were the Lakers, you'd be foolish to ignore that. LeBron James very strategically, though, is taking a real step back when it comes to things like coaching. That's just like his power is so much more implied at this stage than it is like actually put into, hey, go hire the guy I have a podcast with. It's more so the Lakers looking at the situation and saying, we know this guy can talk to LeBron James. We've got, 9 episodes at 45 minutes a pop showing it.
What is this JJ Redick getting into with LeBron at his age? Like, I like this guy. He claims to know a lot, which he does, and you got to have that attitude going into it. But you got LeBron at his age, and I just don't know what he's getting into. That's a dangerous game and a dangerous train he's hopping on right now.
Well, the good news for him, right, is that if he's terrible at it, he will have fallback options, right? Like, this isn't a make or break necessarily for JJ Redick in that way. It is a challenge.
Of course not. Yeah.
And I think he's a guy who embraces challenges, right? Like, that is a big part of who he is as a person. So before I covered the Lakers, I covered the Clippers in Los Angeles. Like, I've seen JJ Redick. I've gotten to know JJ Redick. He's a meticulous worker, a perfectionist, somebody who's going to pour every bit of himself into this job, right? Like, and I think the Lakers are interested in that. But you're right. It is a strange time in their organization as they try to do what's almost impossible, which is care about today in a meaningful way while planning for tomorrow. It's just really hard to do. And that's sort of the situation they are in with a great player at 40 years old in LeBron James.
How tough will that market be on a rookie head coach? Like, is there going to be a little bit of a soft landing? Is there going to be an understanding that he's got to take his lumps along the way, or is he getting thrown right into the fire with that market?
Well, I mean, my colleague Bill Plaski has already considered this a total failure and lunacy in his written stuff, and it's like
just as we suspected.
I don't think the press release has gone out yet. So there's that. But
what's his reasoning though? What's he saying?
What's no experience? Is the big thing, and no experience, and sort of the LeBron factor, which at least optically is an issue. I think it's more optics than it is reality, based on my reporting. But I think it looks bad, and but yeah, I mean, look, Laker fans have short memories, right? Like, this is not a group of people that beloved LeBron James for a very long time. And the sort of LeBron-Kobe rivalries picked very clearly who they thought the best player was, who they thought the MVP should have been. all of that stuff, who they thought was the guy who left his team to go chase rings somewhere else in Miami. Kobe never had to do that. He won him here. And then he becomes a Laker. And look, he's not beloved the same way that Kobe Bryant is, but it's certainly not it's not the type of vitriol that he was facing earlier in his career as a visitor. Like, if you're on their side, they'll roll with you. I think, though, there's not a lot of patience, to the greater point when it comes to the Lakers, right? Like, it's hard to sell Laker fans on a 4-year process or a 3-year process, especially after the Boston Celtics just won a title. Fans here want retribution, and they want it fast, and it's going to be hard. But I will say it would have been hard no matter who they hired, to be totally honest. It's going to be a really hard job.
Right. We're Dan Woike of the LA Times, JJ Redick, the new head coach of the LA Lakers. And I appreciate, Bill Plaski having that approach, because I do think if this was, JJ Redick or anyone in his situation, podcast with a player, blah, 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 going to a smaller market, the bigger market media would just torch it and say that's rinky-dink, it's amateur hour, it's ridiculous. And yet, because it's the Lakers, the biggest brand in the business, because it's LeBron, the biggest brand in the business, there's a part of – yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, this is different, or at least I got to put some respect on it, or it feels that way. I got to let it play out. Yet, I don't know what success looks like. Like you just mentioned, the Lakers and fans, they want a championship. That goes without saying. But again, whoever gets hired in Detroit is going to say we're trying to win a championship. Every team's going to say that in every sport. What does success look like in the next 12 months for you, for JJ Redick and the Lakers?
I mean that's a hell of a question. I mean, I think 2 years ago it was an Eastern Conference a trip to the Western Conference Finals, right? Mm-hmm. And an in-season tournament win, and those guys lost. Those guys lost their jobs. Frank Vogel won a championship, and he lost his job.
Right.
2 years later. So, like, what does success look like in the Lakers? I probably, like, if we can make it through, without I'm sorry, my son just broke into the room. If we can make it through the next, it's adorable, guys, I will tell you. If that's me. That's me. Hey, you want to
Does he have any JJ Redick takes?
Hey,
good to see you,
pal. No, but I think he didn't like that. I think
sorry.
Sorry. No, that's all right. Guys, I tried to teach him to be nice to Canadians. He watched a little bit of the Kendrick thing yesterday, so I think he's got an angry blood.
Yeah, that's causing a stir up here, man. Get DeMar off the stage.
Yeah. All-time Raptors leading scorer. What a shot.
Yeah.
But I think on the success front, competitive basketball is really what matters, right? Like, I mean, every team wants to win titles. The Lakers are judged by whether or not they win titles. I take a bigger picture approach in my general. Play meaningful basketball. You have LeBron James. You got to play important games.
Right.
And hopefully you win them, right? But, like, your games can't mean nothing. In Frank Vogel's last season with the Lakers, Russell Westbrook's first, those games meant nothing at the end of the year. It was a total disaster. The first 3 months of Darvin Ham's tenure with the Lakers, those games meant nothing. And then they got to the Western Conference Finals and feeling the juice in the arena. And, like, I know the tournament was the whatever, but, like, those games had feeling and meaning. And, those games against Denver in the playoffs had feeling and meaning. And I think you just got to be in the mix. And if you're, and that to me if the Lakers are in the mix, JJ Redick has done a good job.
So Rich Paul, who I'm sure you've had many interactions with over the years, has had people up in Toronto, kind of buzzing the last 24 hours because he was speaking with Draft Express, I believe it was, about Bronny James only working out for the Lakers and only working out for the Suns. And he said, that's what I do with all my clients. But he also said there's other teams that love him. He mentioned Minnesota, he mentioned Dallas, and he specifically mentioned the Raptors and Masai Ujiri. He put Masai's name on it and said Masai loves this guy. He could take him at 31 without seeing him. I mean, Rich Paul is the definition of a power broker in the NBA right now. The way he speaks about his power, he says it on the record. I'm actually somewhat taken aback by it every once in a while. But how do you think? Yes, it is. I mean, he's basically saying this is how I'm going to operate, and I'm going to let the world know this is how I operate, and the teams know how I operate. But do you think Masai and the Raptors, like, how would they respond to that? How would they want to hear that? I mean, I don't know what to make of that quote.
Well, so I mean, in one sense, no, right? Like, if you have a player at 31 that you love, truly love, top of your board, you wouldn't want you wouldn't want the 30 teams picking in front of you to know that to a certain degree, right? Now, Bronny James isn't that kind of a player, and this isn't that kind of a draft. What Rich is saying in some ways, and didn't really say out loud, but I've heard from scouts and GMs and draft execs around the league, guys in charge of this stuff, is that like this draft, like the phrase I hear a lot is eye of the beholder. The guy that and this is true for Toronto at 19 too. They may love Zach Edey more than they love any of the other centers in the draft. Like that's a conceivable opinion. And if he's there at 19, they may feel great about it. They may view Bub Carrington from Pitt as the guy that will be the dude that we want to pair next to Emmanuel quickly, and that'll be our backcourt for the next 15 years. Like, they could think that and be credible. You know what I mean? Like, nobody would look at their draft board and say, you had Bub Carrington 7th, you're a moron. Like, it's not that kind of a draft. It's just sort of like, what do you like? Now, the Bronny part of it is interesting because there are some scouts that totally believe this guy is draftable, right? That he's got obviously a good pedigree. He plays the right way. He's been around great people in terms of like his development to date, and he will develop even more seemingly in the NBA. He's 12 months removed from a cardiac arrest, so there'll be more confidence that comes with that in the future. He's a good leaper. He plays bigger than his size. That's what the people who like him say. There are other people who say like this is insane. He averaged 4 points a game at USC. Like, why would anybody draft him?
Right.
Like, you hear really both, right? But I think in this draft, it's like, what do you like? You know what I mean? And it's important to remember, like, even at 31, now look, great players have been taken in the second round. Jalen Brunson, Draymond Green, like early second round picks are important. If you go back and look at the guys that are taken there, I mean, you miss way more than you hit. And so I think like those level of, this is sort of, I don't want to say I feel bad for Bronny James because I absolutely do not feel bad for Bronny James on this front, but that is sort of the curse of the name in this, right? Is that like, in what world are we talking about a guy getting potentially picked 31st in a real meaningful way? And like, I mean, I'm as guilty of it as anybody. I wrote 3,000 words about him earlier this year. It's just like, but he's probably the most famous person in this draft. I don't think there's any probably to it. And he'll be like one of the big storylines, and he could get picked 55th.
Yep, that's it. He'll be the face of the draft, and he could go 55th. That's exactly what's forthcoming here. Dan, great catching up with you, man. Really appreciate you doing this. We'll do it again soon. Thank you for this.
Thanks, guys, and thanks for no kinder questions. I appreciate it. Keep me out of trouble. I love my friends in Toronto. So
all good. Appreciate it. Thank you. There's Dan Woike of the LA Times. Yeah. I also, listen, Rich Paul mentioned Minnesota, Dallas. They got later picks in the second round. I don't think it's a coincidence the Raptors picked 31. He wants this kid to get into the first round, right? He's trying to
sprinkling something in, right?
Yeah.
You got to make it not obvious, so you throw a couple other names in there.
Exactly. But he wants people to think 31, he's gone, so you better take him in the first round. That's what he's hoping for here. But
they mentioned Hayes. I think any other kid, and this is just me thinking out loud, that medical history, any other kid would be like, we don't even know if you're going to get drafted. But when your name's Bronny James.
Exactly.
Like, I'm serious. If it was another kid who was just like, with that medical history, it would scare the hell out of people.
Right. And the statistics.
No kidding.
And the size. He's not a big kid.
4 points a game and he had an issue. It's like, people would put that piece of paper aside and said, we got to move on from that piece of paper.
Right. He wouldn't be drafted. He wouldn't be talked about. And obviously, the reason he's talked about, we all know.
That's not opinion. That's a fact.
That's a fact. And the reason he's being talked about is because he's LeBron's kid. And it's not a very good draft. No one knows. There's no profile for these top-end picks. So it's going to be the Bronny James draft, and he may not even get drafted. Like, that's the truth. If he doesn't get drafted, that's a story. Who signs him? Where does he go? It's just, it's not going to stop. We'll come back with our best bets. Brought to you by FanDuel. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, today's best bets powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. You can have faith in the Canadians tonight. I'm a Canadian boy. I'm going to have faith. Playing a couple of props. Canada, Argentina. Yes, both teams score tonight. Argentina, I'm fairly certain, will snipe.
You think Canada scores tonight?
I think Canada's going to get on the board. I think they're going to get on the board, and I have Jonathan David to either score or get an assist on that. I could see a penalty kick. David's going to take it, right? This is what I envision. I think Argentina is going to win tonight. Let's call it what it is. You can't even bet on Argentina. It's like minus 500 or something. But I think both teams get on the board, and I think David's going to factor into the goal for Canada. That's where I'm at. I like where he's at. I like the way he's playing right now. He's looking for a new contract, too, over in Europe. I saw that Shinetti was tweeting about that. Even Davies is possibly leaving Bayern at some point. Maybe he ends up in the EPL. Who knows? Maybe he goes to Spain. Anything's possible for the Canadian boys. But right now their focus is on Copa America, and that's coming up tonight right here on TSN Radio on TSN. Today's best bets were powered by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app today and find thousands of ways to play. Please play responsibly. Must be 19 plus. Physically located in Ontario. All right, here we go. Go time tonight. And tomorrow, we'll get to the 5-pack. Couldn't slide it in today. We had so many different guests. We had a lot of different things.
I think we lead the show with it tomorrow.
I'll do it at 4 tomorrow, I promise, out of the gate. That's a perfect tease for the game tomorrow night. All right? Frankie, good seeing you, buddy. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, boys. Appreciate it.
Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today. TV, radio, podcast, web. We appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at
Jonathan Marchesso.
4 p.m.
You can't be in on everything, and there were no lessons learned. We'll chat then.
Yes.